Hey, if you're listening to the Food Origins podcast or watching it on YouTube, you'll know that this podcast is sponsored by Firecracker Farm out of Florida. Alex and his family have a small business where they infuse hot peppers into sea salt. Their main one, bread and butter, is Three Kings. It's got Ghost, Scorpion, and Reapers. If you guys have probably seen me using this probably over a year now on Instagram. I post a lot of different recipes. I've got a blog on their website, firecracker.farm, for recipes, and a discount code for 10% off is Food Origins Pod C at firecracker.farm. 10% of the proceeds go to Pipe Hitter Foundation and Operation 300. So make sure you check that out. Appreciate your support, and thanks for listening. Enjoy the show.
What's cool is, to tell you is like I've been an end user of your product since August of 2020. So that's how far back
Wow,
I go.
that was early.
Yeah.
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 How,
So I
how'd you discover it?
have, back when you're, the packaging was still clear and like doing the flavors. We'll just kick this off without I'm honored to have Nate Kouhana on. We're welcome to another episode of the Food Origins podcast. Nate Kouhana is the CEO and founder of Anthem Snacks. He served in the U.S. Army as a Green Beret in 3rd Special Forces Group. Appreciate you for your service. And
Thanks.
Texas born and raised and now based in Montana. So appreciate you coming on, Nate.
Thanks. Yeah, good to be here. Appreciate it.
Yep. You've got a lot of milestones that we'll get into about everything that you've been doing. But I do want to kind of go back a little bit, give us your ethnic background. And then what I kind of like to start off with, because this is all about food as well, is what'd you eat growing up as a kid?
Man, it's all over the map. So my dad's actually originally from Algeria, and then eventually moved to Israel. So I grew up eating a lot of North African food, couscous, just a lot of stuff coming from there. So mostly vegetables with lamb and beef and all that good stuff. A lot of spices. And then he ended up being the head chef of Continental Airlines when I was growing up. So which is now United. So I kind of went from kind of the traditional family foods we were eating to everything from, fillets and everything else he was making, which I probably didn't appreciate enough growing up. So the spectrum was pretty wide. It's pretty wide.
Yeah. Do you have like an initial like taste memory? Obviously the home cooked meals are going to be, probably come to first. Do you have like an initial one? You're like, man, this brings me back.
Yeah, it is the couscous. Honestly, just that couscous, which is made from scratch, because you're gonna have beef, you're gonna have vegetables, you're gonna have potatoes in there. It just felt like everything was right there, everything you needed, and it was filling, and you get it in like a big bowl, and so everyone's just kind of taking their scoops, which was so different than everything else my friends were eating at the time. So everybody else was eating burgers and all that good stuff, which I love, because we have great barbecue and everything in Texas. That was the first time I just remember, like, why doesn't anybody else eat this stuff? But I loved it. I loved it growing up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and at what point did you start diving into some of the barbecue in Texas? You
Oh,
grew up in
early.
Houston, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Houston. So early. I mean, you get
Yeah.
exposed to barbecue everywhere from Houston. And then, my brother went to UT. My mom was living in San Marcos. I had friends in San Antonio, so all down that I-35 corridor. You're just getting all the barbecue, which is really good. And so I grew up in Houston where it started. And then the barbecue kept getting better as we moved closer to Austin, to be honest. So it was really
Right.
good. Yeah, I
And
mean, I'm
now
a huge
like
brisket fan.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to ask, but do you have a favorite out of the barbecues out there?
Oh man, I'm trying to remember the ones we had. I don't remember the ones in Houston growing up necessarily, but
Mhm.
there's so many good ones in Austin. So
Yeah.
many good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm blanking on the names right now, but there's a lot of good barbecue places in
Yeah,
Austin.
there's some big ones for sure.
Yeah.
So, kind of getting into growing up, did you always know you wanted to get into the military? Was that something that was on your mind at an early age?
Not necessarily. My dad served in the IDF, so it wasn't like a big thing on my mind because there wasn't just a lot going on at the time, like Grenada and stuff, right? There wasn't like a lot going on with where the country is at. I mean, the Gulf War, that first Gulf War, I remember watching the Super Bowl like everybody else in I think it was 1990 or whatever, and you felt pride in your country, but the gap between there and anything going on by the time I got out of college, or by the time I was in high school and whatnot, there wasn't a lot going on. I was actually studying abroad in Paris when 9/11 happened, and it was just like a light switch. It was just like you immediately just you can't help but to think like, hey, everything you have, all the liberties and everything you have, you kind of take for granted, and then you realize, that was given through blood of previous generations and sacrifice. And then you have to ask yourself, what are you doing? And at that point, it was clear as day to me, like everybody back then, the whole GWAT cohort, everybody was signing up to join at that point.
Yeah. And then, what was that like going from, studying in Paris, right? And then into the military? How was that transferred in? And then how did your career go?
It was shocking because I'm going from I'm in high school by the time, and you play sports, you do all that stuff, but you're kind of just grounded, in Texas, which I love. You feel like for the first time, even though I have family in other parts of the world, you feel like for the first time you're traveling in college, you're out on your own. Studying abroad was kind of a big first step because you're kind of, exploring and you're trying to challenge yourself or find things to, not necessarily add adversity, but just kind of, be different so you can take these different experiences of life. And I thought that was kind of the journey I was on. And then you kind of, you get hit with that and you're just like, oh, this is for, kids. Like, this is like, there's real stuff going on in the world. And so I just remember when that happened, it was like, I went from like backpacking to like packing your bags, getting on a bus, going to Fort Benning and going to basic training. And it was night and day within, a very short amount of time.
Yeah, and I know, like, I read, a bunch of the things in how you career you thank your recruiter for kind of guiding into where you wanted to go. Was that something you knew already? You're like, yeah, I want to go into special forces, or was it just
I
you're just kind of
Yeah,
exploring?
honestly, yeah, at that point, I just figured I was a body that, I just assumed, there would be a need for guys to join. I didn't know what was possible, what wasn't possible. I actually showed up to the Marine recruiter office, and I wanted to be a Marine officer at the time, and they were just like, there's like a 6-month wait list, which I thought was insane. I was like, don't you need guys,
Yeah.
and so I left there and I went over, there was a Navy and an Army recruiting office kind of in the same strip mall in Texas. And I went back to back, and it just so happens the recruiter, who was like a mechanic who showed me the right video, was just like, you can do this, and you're just like, okay,
Okay.
that seems like it's a challenge. And if you're going to be in the war, you want to be kind of at the tip of the spear and really contributing. So that's what made the most sense for me.
Definitely. Definitely. And then tell us kind of what happened to you. I mean, you had some experience and then you got hurt out there. Tell us what happened. I know you've told this story before, but for everyone, tell us what happened.
Yeah, I actually don't talk about that much, but so I was in Afghanistan in 2008.
Hmm.
We were, doing a combat tour over there, and we got ambushed on. I was the head intel guy on the team, so I was really in charge of setting up the target packages and whatnot. And this just happened to be something we were going to check out, but we weren't going to go do a hit necessarily. And you could just tell everything was off, right? The kids were gone, the women were gone. They had the black flags out and everything else. So we knew something was up, and we were in Ghazni at the time, and the place we were going to really just had one way in and kind of one egress way out, and we were giving up the high ground. So we were aware, but we just weren't sure when and if things were going to pop off. And when they did, it happened pretty quick. I was actually on the Mark 19. I ended up getting hit. We had one of our Sade attachments. Unfortunately, Nick, he got killed, and so I medevaced out with him. So we're in a gunfight for a while, and then kind of fought our way back. Got medevaced out. I ended up getting flown one fob and then ended up back in Bagram, totally out of it at that point, obviously. And then I fought really hard to stay in country. That was important to me, and I had to kind of hit these milestones where cognitively, I was there, and physically I was there, and they wouldn't let me leave the wire for a couple of weeks until I got my equilibrium back and all that stuff. And so by the time I got back to my team, it was super important to me that we went back out there. And because I was the kind of what we call the advanced special operations guy on the team, I was the guy in charge of, putting together packets along with our 18 Fox. You couldn't really leave the wire because I was kind of the guy collecting all the information and doing that through the guys I was running. And so it was important to me to get back out so we can go hit all the target packages we had. But second of all, you want to get back out there because that's where you got hit. And we put together a huge mission, battalion-sized mission to go back out there, which was important because we went back out there, gotten more firefights, and it was a successful mission. Nobody got hurt on that one. And so I took a lot of pride just kind of getting back on the horse, if you
Getting
will.
back in, yeah.
Yeah. So
And then
sorry. So I got
no, that's all
wounded.
good.
I got
Yeah.
grazing headshot. So went through my ear probe, down my Kevlar, down the kind of the side of my head. I still have no hearing in my left side. Still deal with obviously stuff from that. But it affected when we got back, it affected a lot of what I did. I was on the Halo team, so the military free fall team, and going up at certain altitudes was really difficult. Going through the shoot house afterwards was really challenging because I couldn't tell where, you know, direction of fire was coming from. So it really did affect a lot of things. It ultimately played a huge role in me deciding when my contract was up, really just to kind of move on.
And then, you know, not to mention you are a Purple Heart recipient as well. People know that.
Yeah.
So, you know, what was your mindset leaving? Like, you know, what were you thinking about doing at that time? Because, you know, obviously it's kind of a shock to you. You know, I was in, I didn't have the injury you had, but I did get injured on duty and ended up having to leave my department. And you're going through, you know, all the things, all the ideas going through your head of what to do. And what's crazy is you ended up out in San Francisco. Were you in Chicago or San Francisco first? Tell us about that and tell us, you know, what was going through your head.
Yeah, honestly, you're dealing with a lot because
Yeah.
at the time I think I'm 29, and you're really, most guys at that point, I think I'm 6 years in, and they're throwing, you know, they're throwing contracts at you, which either gets you the 10-year mark. And in my head, it's like if you're going to do 10 years, you might as well get to 20 years and kind of get the, you know, the retirement and everything goes with that. And then I'm trying to figure out, well, how many more things can I do given, you know, what I've already done versus what I want to do. And at 29 years old, you either need to stay this is what it played in my head. You either need to stay in there and make a career of this, or you need to get out because you've got a lot of catching up to do in the civilian world. Unless you're going to go into the, you know, into the defense industry or really go into, you know, private industry doing what you previously did, which a lot of us did. I also did some contract work when I got out. But, you know, you're really prolonging the inevitable, which is you've got to get a skill set or, you know, whatever you need to do to catch up with your resume and your skill set to be employable, to move on. And so that transition, and we didn't have the skill bridge programs and all the stuff they have today. It was just kind of like hey, I give you a pat on the butt and tell you to go make the best of it. And you're stubborn at that time. You're not worried about what you're going to get for disability and all these other things. You're just, you know, I never wanted my, you know, me getting wounded to define me, period. I just never wanted that to be like the highlight of my life, you know? So it was important for me to kind of get out. The issue was it was right during the financial crisis. So I remember we were doing our Halo train up, our annual Halo train up, and the market's crashing. And I'm in like Yuma, you know, jumping out of planes. I'm starting to doubt, like, is this the right move for me at that point? Because I don't know what my skill set is. I probably need to, if you want to go get more education, like, I don't even know where to start at this point, to be honest with you. And I just remember thinking, well, maybe it's an opportunity, right? You know, where there's adversity and there's hard times, there's always some opportunity. And I just remember I hadn't even make up my mind. So I decided to get out. And to be completely honest, you do have a little bit of comfort knowing you could always do some contract work. You could always go meet with different agencies and whatnot. So I didn't feel like it was an all or nothing at that point. I felt like the skill set and experience I had could translate if I wanted to go do other government jobs. So I decided to get out. I had a buddy he was working at one of the big four consulting at the time. And so he had just got accepted to Stanford Business School. And he was trying to convince me to come out and either go to business school or start something with him. And he was a former third group guy as well. And I just remember thinking, I was like, what am I going to do in Stanford Business School? I have like no business experience at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wasn't coming from the consulting world. So he at least had some real life experience doing some other stuff. But I came out to San Francisco, I visited, and I just remember when I came, he was in Palo Alto on the, you know, Stanford campus. And I went to San Francisco. You're still young, you're kind of hungry, you want something different. I remember I just showed up to San Francisco. I just started meeting everybody, and it was a completely different world. And for me at the time, it was perfect. Coming from the military, this was a complete 180 where it felt like, and they were also coming out of the financial crisis where there was a lot of opportunities and things were kind of moving fast. And I liked the idea that they were moving fast, smart people, they were breaking things. It just felt like there wasn't as much red tape. And even though you come from a flat unit in the military, there's a lot of risk mitigation because there's consequences and people's careers are on the line and dire consequences, you know, with life or death at times. And so it felt new and exciting. And I literally just packed a suitcase and moved out there. And I was like, I'll just, like anything, if you don't have a plan B, you'll just figure it out. And so that's kind of what I did. I had another buddy, another third group guy who's like, that sounds cool. So he then came out a few months later, found a place. And then I ended up meeting this guy that just started a company, and he was like the first intern at Facebook. And so he had like a small dev team, nobody outside of like developers. And we just kind of hit it off. And I started working there without a clue what I was doing. And it was like a fire hose. And so next thing I know, I'm in a SaaS company, which today would be like predictive, AI or something. And it's exciting. I'm working with a lot of smart people in a brand new space. And I'm trying to, everyone's completely different. I mean, working with coders and developers is completely different than the world I came from. And so it was new, it was exciting. I was in a city with a lot of, food, with a lot of different culture, all that stuff. And that was an amazing experience until you kind of got past the piece where, oh, it's new and exciting. Then you start looking around, you're like, oh man, we don't have a lot in common with a lot of these people. You just start realizing our values are a little bit different. Yes, they're very smart, but there's a lot of groupthink that happens here. They're all kind of speaking the same. There's not a lot of diversity of thought. And I'm from Texas. I'm from like wide open spaces. And now I'm living in this like, 1 or 2 bedroom, place in San Francisco, and it's crammed, and you're working for a 26-year-old who's smart, but he's got the weight of the world on him. And so you're just like, is this really what I want to be doing? And it felt kind of like the military. So I did that for about 4 years. It felt kind of like the military, where I was like, okay, I have the experience. I need to kind of, recalibrate and figure out what I want in life and what I want to do next and what's the right move for me, because the new shiny thing is kind of worn off, and I got to figure out where I want to live. I want to start a family, what that's going to look like. So that's kind of what got me to San Francisco. That was kind of the San Francisco experience, but I got the full experience. I mean, we worked for a startup that raised like $125 million from Founders Fund with Peter Thiel and Formation 8 with Joe Lonsdale and all these different, I didn't have a clue about any of this stuff. So it was fun. It was exciting. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are pitching the same ideas, raising a lot of money. Are they changing the world? Not everybody's going to be the next Facebook or Google or whatnot, right?
Yeah, and you were looking for that purpose, right?
Yeah, I completely missed that. I missed the team room environment, to be honest. I ran from it when I first got out because I wanted something different. And then you start realizing, oh, that's the reason I joined. It wasn't to make a career, it wasn't to make a bunch of money. It was, you had a common mission and purpose. You did it for the guy next to you, and you try to be the best version of yourself, to better yourself, but also to make sure that you're held accountable to the guy next to you.
Yeah. Is that when you started looking? And just a fun fact for you, I was on patrol in 2000, from 2006 to like 2019. So I was in the city rolling around in San Francisco, the police department. So during that time, yeah. So that was the and definitely that time that you're talking about was definitely the height of the comeback of startups and new companies coming in, building up their systems. And then I was dealing with all the madness of San Francisco as it is, with
I can imagine
crime and then also the good stuff too with the sports teams and everything. But so you were looking for purpose, and then you decided to, how did you get pulled up to Montana? Was that you had visited there, or how did you get that idea to go up there?
So first, when I left San Francisco, I needed structure. So I ran away from structure. I got kind of the chaos, but a really good experience. And I just needed a little structure to put all these worlds together. I was like, I took some really good learnings out of the military. I learned a lot in San Francisco. It was just very chaotic in how do you move forward with this. And I wanted to kind of start my own thing or be part of a team, but I need to kind of get away from just kind of the thought process on either coast, to be honest with you. And so at that time, it made sense. My buddy that I told you I initially, he was going to Stanford. I said, I started rethinking that. I said, maybe I should go to business school as just an opportunity to kind of get away from it, regroup. I have a GI Bill to use still. So, and maybe that'll just give me an opportunity to kind of think about what I want to do next. And if I end up starting my own thing, maybe I'll be a little bit more prepared for it and kind of go from there. And so at that point, I went to Chicago to go to the University of Chicago because I didn't want to go on either coast. I really wanted to do something more in the Midwest where, it just wasn't as shiny as what was going on the coast. And so I ended up in Chicago for a couple of years. And over there, I had a buddy that we had talked about doing a business together. And we had looked at a lot of different things. And to be honest, I really wasn't even wasn't trying to like start the next big technology company or anything. I just wanted to do something that I felt I was fulfilled, something that seemed interesting, and that I in a place that I could I could enjoy living. And so he had his dad was actually looking for a place in Montana. And I had a friend that was in 10th Special Forces Group that was a cop in Montana. And so I decided to come out let me back up. So he was looking for a house, and he actually came across a broker that was trying to sell 3 meat processing plants. And so they were trying to put this deal together, and he asked me if I had any interest, and I told him I don't know anything about the meat industry. I don't know anything about running a plant. Like, that just seems crazy. And he said, no, what we would do is we would kind of just be investors and then really work on kind of the branding and all the stuff that goes with that. And so I said, that doesn't seem like the smartest thing. I'm not leveraging my network in the military. I just paid a lot of money to go to business school. I'm not leveraging the network I made there. And I'm moving to a place where I don't know anybody. But I decided to come out and meet the 3 families. I tell people all the time, I just kind of fell in love with it. It was, but better in a lot of ways, because it was just empty. It was like so raw. And I came up here and I worked, I went to the plants with these guys, and you could just see them working day in and day out. And these guys own these plants for 40 plus years. It was really interesting just to see how the food supply chain worked, just to kind of really get exposed to something completely different. Even though I'm from Texas, I'm not, I didn't spend any time in the cattle business or anything in the cattle business. So I decided at that point I was going to really see what I could do at the state level. How could I help them out besides being an investor for what they were doing? I was going to go at the state level and see if there was any grants or just any incentives that are there, that these plants, because they're just trying to keep the lights on, they're working so many hours during the day. They don't have time to fill out applications, or they don't really know what's going on. And so our idea was to combine these 3 plants and really really brand Montana beef. That's what we were going to do, and really do source verified all the way down to the rancher. And we were going to set that up. And my buddy had really good connections with meat purveyors and restaurateurs and all that on the coast. And we thought we could kind of make this like New Zealand lamb. You know what I mean? It would be Montana beef, and do a grading and a designation and all of that. And so I put about 8 months into that. Really hard to put the deal together. The next generation doesn't really want to take over from their family. They went to college. They're trying to leave the small town they're from.
Right.
Labor is very tight over here, and the plants were state inspected, not USDA. They were all from the 60s, and all 3 of the families were sort of negotiating against themselves, because we needed all of their expertise, and they were all doing the same thing. And so we needed them to kind of specialize in what their piece was. And then we're going to build a state-of-the-art new facility here. And the more I dug into this, the more I realized the infrastructure is just not here. At least it wasn't there at the time. Even if you build a processing plant, you need kill facilities, right? And they don't have enough slaughterhouses here, and you need feedlots, and they don't have enough of that. Most of the cattle get shipped across state lines. And you start learning all this stuff, and then you're just realizing this is going to be a process. And the negotiation was very hard to put together to satisfy all 3 families, because nobody really wanted to work for the next guy and whatnot. So long story short, my buddy ended up investing in one of the plants. I was like, I didn't come out to Montana to invest in one meat processing plant. That wasn't my idea of what this would look like. Right. But I had already put so much time. I was going to meat processing conventions. I was just learning as much as I could at that time. And I decided, well, I can't do all of it. You can't catch up on 40 years. What I can probably do is in the research I had done, I said we could probably do meat snacks. That's like a high value added product. And instead of telling their story, it would just be kind of my story. And that was kind of the genesis of it all. And so I just started putting, rough business plan together, not to really give to anyone, just to kind of work through my own ideas, come up with kind of the branding piece of it and whatnot. And then started Anthem Snacks in the best timing, which is like June of 2020, smack in the middle of COVID, when everyone's like, wait, who the heck needs another meat snack company in the world? So,
which is nuts. And then if you didn't know, you might know, I had Greg Putnam on a Little Bell Cattle. Yeah. So, similar timing as far as starting a meat business. He started the same year. And how'd you come up with the name? And then we'll get into, of course, everything Anthem.
Yeah, the name was really just a product of, you got to have something that you could trademark, and there's only so many things you could trademark. At the time, the national anthem thing was going on, and all the kneeling and stuff would really piss me off. And then I've been a fan of like Ayn Rand, so the novel. It just seemed like, looking back, it's nothing compared to where we ended up, but it seemed like the country I knew was changing, and it seemed like I don't want to say it was a dystopian time where it seemed like a lot of individuality was leaving for more collectivism and thought process. And somewhere between all three of those, I just decided, well, you need something. So that's kind of what I came up with. And I always thought, like, if you could start telling the stories, and the people that serve would kind of be the lyrics to our anthem, is what early on I was trying to come up with.
Yeah. And was this like, I've got to ask, like, have you made jerky before? Back, were you making it yourself for snacks, like on the road and stuff,
Yeah,
or just
I
kind of
had done
came
it like
into
everybody
play?
else, like, yeah, dehydrating and stuff like that, but not on like this kind of scale. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I was trying to learn as much as I can, because again, when we were talking the three meat processing conventions, when we were doing the meat processing shows and whatnot, they would do these like jerky competitions, and so you would get in there and kind of see how they're making this stuff, and everything was like vacuum sealed, and it was really good. But I never understood how you could really scale it. It didn't quite make sense to me. I mean, you need a lot of equipment between the smokehouse, between smokehouses and everything. And then a lot of people are using, liquid gas and stuff like that. And you're like, okay, how do you do this where it actually tastes pretty good? Right. And so everything from using real wood smoke and everything, where again, other people are using liquid smoke. Right. And it's an artificial feeling, taste. I mean, and I remember, when we all dehydrated our own jerky and did some of that stuff, it always tasted better. When people go hunting, it always tastes amazing. Why does that taste so different than the stuff I'm buying in the gas station, or the stuff I would be eating on a ruck march, or, on a truck somewhere, which tasted like cardboard? I had no clue why it was so different until I started working with some of these individuals that were kind of showing me what this looked like. And I was like, so you can actually have good tasting jerky. A lot of it's just about the inputs and what the cost factor is, but it's a huge capital investment to do it at scale. So
Yeah. And, like I was saying earlier, if you guys didn't hear, I've been an end user of Anthem since August 2020. Saw you guys through, I think, either an ad or something, and then also with Fieldcraft Survival and Mikey Hernandez and Glover. That whole team, you guys are putting it out, and it's been good from the start. And a lot of people know, if they know me, I was giving them out as gifts and stuff to people. And like, here's your newest package, which is the smoked honey, which is my favorite. And we'll kind of go through every lineup, everything in the lineup that you had. And one of the you've got some awesome milestones through the years already since you guys have started. You got it on United Airlines. You guys are you opened your HQ, which you're sitting at. It looks like maybe you're at now.
Yep.
And which is awesome. And then I will get into your contract with the UFC, which I love, because if you're an MMA fan, where the fighting world is, and they're always looking for healthy food and healthy snacks. So it's awesome to see you guys in the octagon on that contract as well, which is pretty recent. Get into the flavors. Like, how did you? I mean, obviously we kept, you got some original peppered smoked honey spices. How did you develop that kind of your style? Because it is tender, it is easy to eat. Like you were talking about, like it's got like this, like, it's yeah, that's the easiest thing for me to say, is like, it's tender, really easy to eat. Like, you want to eat more, you'll eat the whole bag, for the most part. You don't want to, yeah, you're not having to fight it like some of the other brands you were talking about. Like, it's like you tear it out of the package and you're like, just like, struggling with it. And, it may taste okay, but like yeah, you don't want to go back to it because you're like, oh man, that was like trying to break my teeth or something. So how did you develop your recipe and come up with all the different flavors? And we'll talk about some of your new stuff too.
Yeah, early on, you just don't know what you don't know. Early on,
Yeah.
you start doing research and you're like, well, the top 5 selling flavors are, right? And it's always the same. It's like original teriyaki, peppered, hot and spicy.
Mhm.
And so you're just like, okay, well, if those are the top flavors, I should have my version of that, is initially what I thought. And so then you start working with the R&D team at the manufacturing plant. You're trying to figure out, hey, how do we get this? I kind of describe what I'm looking for, because right, you could have it, like you said, it could be nice and tender, or you could have that kind of, cowboy taste, or where it's a little bit more rougher, right?
Mhm.
The cowboy cut, if you want. And so I knew what I was looking for. And then you want it, do you want it to be, at the time, biltong was just coming out, So do you want it to be kind of dry? Do you want it to be sweet? What are you looking for? And to me, flavor was important, especially because, again, this is all from the research initially. I was like, most of this stuff is sold in gas stations, right? I mean, obviously grocery stores too, but I'm so new to this. It's not worth me like coming up with, I'm not the smart. I'm not going to figure out what everybody else already knows, right? And so I'm funding this thing myself. I'm not going to go out on a crazy limb and start coming up with all these crazy flavors. And then I'm kind of stuck to that and nobody's going to buy them. Right. So initially I was a little bit in a box on the flavors themselves. It was just a matter of like, I want them to taste really good. Right. And making sure we source really simple ingredients, something that's good. The one little piece we added into everything was just, I wanted honey in all my flavors because I like that sweetness in there. And I want it to be kind of a natural sweetness. Well, then I launched that and I realized, oh yeah, well, you know what? Everybody's selling those same flavors. So how am I supposed to get on the peg at some gas station when they've already got all those flavors? And so then I realized, well, I like honey. So then I came up with the smoked honey mix. We worked on that for a little while. And eventually we came out with a bourbon, which that kind of the genesis of that was there's a better known distillery here in Montana. I just thought it'd be a cool story and to use real bourbon. And those were the two hottest flavors we had. That was
Right there.
There you go. Appreciate it. So that was the light bulb just kind of went off after that because I was like, okay. And then you start realizing, well, not everyone buys in gas stations. I started figuring out where can I go compete because it's very hard to compete in this, convenience store space because most of those pegs are bought by the big guys. And so then you kind of zig when everyone else zags. And that's how we kind of ended up on United Airlines. We ended up in Lowe's home improvement store. I was just trying to go anywhere where it was honestly less competitive, at least if you made it in the door. And then I knew I had my top two flavors. I really took those lessons when I decided to come out with our all beef sticks. I really decided, hey, I need something that can play in the convenience space, the grocery space, and across the board. Yeah, appreciate that.
There we go.
And I wanted a better for you product that would be a little bit more appealing to the females. And sticks were trending. They were just trending in a better direction than beef jerky was at the time anyway. And so I thought there was more opportunity for a little bit more bolder flavors, a little bit less competitive space. Even though Slim Jim is a huge player in this space, everybody knows that's not real beef, and a lot of people are using a beef pork blend. And so that really left an opening was what I saw, which is something that aligned to what I wanted to do anyway, right? Which is I wanted a good tasting product. So we worked on the flavor profiles for those. Again, honey is big to me. So we came out with a hot honey. I didn't want to do this exact same thing as our jerky with our beef stick. So I put a little twist on it. I wanted to have a little bit of a kick. So we went through iterations of that. Some of it was figuring out, hey, what's kind of trending, what's out there, tested it, on your friends and family. Some of that stuff took over 6 months to come up with some of those flavors to really get it dialed in. But it was important to me. And so when we launched that, the biggest thing that people don't realize is we have no country of origin labeling requirements in the US. Most people don't realize the beef they're eating is coming from Brazil, Mexico, Canada, Uruguay, or in the case of the grass fed, which is like the biggest thing trending, all that stuff's coming from Australia. And so that thing's coming on a shipping container. It's being thawed out. And like you said, you talked to Greg Putnam. I met Greg pretty much the same time we started our business together. And I told him, I said, what you're doing is kind of what I was trying to do on the processing side. And he's doing it on the ranching side and what they're doing. It's amazing. But supporting the American rancher just fit in line with everything else we were talking about, right? It's like, I'm a veteran owned business. I'm out here in Montana where the cattle to human ratio is like 2 to 1. Everybody else is running these organizations that have a meat snack company, and they're like in Brooklyn or they're in Boston or all this crazy stuff. And I was like, and they're not even using US beef. I was like, this is crazy. So, it's important to me to make it with 100% American beef and support the American rancher through and through. And I just think it's a better tasting product because it's just a fresher product. It's not coming over, like I said, on a shipping container. And so that was important to me. We took kind of all those lessons, worked on the flavor profile. We are going to be introducing something outside of beef here in the next couple of months, just because we want to make sure it's not only beef, that we can attract a female customer. And, that's important to us. But we do hang our hat on beef. That's like our number one thing. And so far the story has resonated, at least with some of the, the big organizations. We're actually going to be, we'll be actually doing our first Costco rotation with our bourbon jerky in June.
Right. That's huge.
Yeah. And then, that's a big opportunity for us. And then and then we'll do a stick rotation, most likely with hot honey or original. We're going to do our road show and see which one sells better. But we just think at the end of the day, when you slap that veteran owned piece on there, it's not meant to be like a marketing gimmick. It's really meant to really just cut through to the consumer and say, hey, look, where is your money being spent? Do you share the values with the organization that's providing your food? And I think that's important. And when you see that veteran owned label on there, it pretty much says you're a small business owner. And then when you throw when you show that you've obviously served your country and you have like-minded values and all that stuff, and then you support American ranching, I think it's the only way to compete, given my budget and my resources, with the big guys out there. Because I can't be doing Super Bowl ads and all the other stuff. So.
Yeah, but like, you make a huge point that a lot of people don't understand especially with the beef sticks and jerky as well, is that the meat is sourced from God knows where, and that's like one of the big things that is an issue, like especially even with restaurants and stuff, trying to get everything locally sourced, which is so much better for your body. All that comes into play. I think one of the things you didn't mention and that I love, and it goes through the roof here because I've got 3 dogs, is your canine. As you know, it's empty already. Is your canine snacks? I mean, how did you develop that? Obviously, I mean, of course, dogs love meat and stuff, but how did that come about? And I mean, dude, these are gone, and like, as soon as the package is open. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a dog lover, and I think everyone, when you're sitting around, you're just like, it just seems kind of crazy that, you're sitting out there, you're having snacks. I can't tell you how many times, my friends and I are, we got treats for our dogs. I'm like, well, I'm in the beef industry. I make snacks. I don't want to be a pet food, company.
Right.
That wasn't the intention, but it just seemed crazy. I was like, why wouldn't we just make a canine treat as a little just nice to have? That way, for all of our customers that go out there, they can actually, give something, a good dog treat to their dogs. And it's made here in Montana. It's really good. So we just kind of that wasn't as hard because you don't have USDA sitting on checking everything. But so we just had to put, and I can't taste it necessarily, right? So you're tasting it on dogs.
Yeah.
So it's it was just a fun project to do, and our customers really enjoy it. So making sure that when they go on their adventures, they have something for their best friend.
Yeah, and I think like I can attest to it. I have 3 of them. They're all rescue dogs, and they all love it. But it's also, I think probably too, is like when you do bust out some jerky or a beef stick, they want a piece of that. So you're having to give them a piece of that, and you're like, oh great, I don't get to eat my snack. So it's nice to have their own. It's like, oh, you have your own now, so you finish that, you're SOL for that,
Yep, absolutely.
I'd love to hear how the UFC contract came about. I'm a big fan of Dana White. I have some lovely stories with that guy. I have some epic experiences with him. I've been to a ton of UFC live events, and even got to speak to him quite a bit. Nice. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes things are out of your hands.
Yeah.
We were on United Airlines. They were having an event in Newark, New Jersey, and I guess the Wi-Fi was down. And one of their executives picked up the little Hemisphere magazine where they happened to feature us. And that was really it. He reached out with an email, and I thought it was complete shit. I was like, this is bullshit. Like, why would the UFC be calling me right now? And he said, no, I think we're really interested. We think you guys would be a great fit for what we do. And I told him, I said, I don't know how well you think we're doing. But we are, because, when you think of the UFC, time it's Jose Cuervo and it's Monster, all these big organizations. And I was like, he said, no, we get it. We're willing to work with you. We think you're the perfect partner for this space. We have, just between the warrior ethos and the like-minded with the values of discipline and hard work and being patriotic and all that stuff. And so we flew out, we met those guys. They brought us to an event, awesome team. And then they worked with us, and we worked really hard to put something together that made sense for us, given where we were as a company and how young we were. It's a blast. I mean, this last year, I was at UFC 300. I was at the one in the Sphere. I went to a bunch of events this year. It was awesome.
Yeah, the Noche one. The
Noche, yeah, that was
smokes.
crazy.
Yeah.
That was pretty wild.
And that's awesome. And I can attest, like, Dana's a straight shooter, man. He'll tell you like it is, and he appreciates you. And it's awesome to see that. Like, and some of your accolades too is like, even just starting out, you got Montana Veteran Business of the Year award. And then, you got into United Airlines. How did that come about with the airline?
Yeah, it was one of those things, like I was mentioning early on, just where can I kind of compete without, really having to have a war chest behind me as far as resources.
Yeah.
So the airlines kind of made sense. It's, in this category, you're typically talking to buyers and, for category reviews. And that just seemed like it wasn't necessarily going anywhere, because what's the incentive for a buyer to take somebody else off the shelf for somebody they've never heard of? And I wasn't getting great traction there early on, even though I was making headway, but it was tough slaying, right? And you're learning all these things on what promotions look like. You're just all this stuff you don't know anything about. So I just started going above all the buyers and really trying to find organizations where I thought the story would land. And airlines made sense to me because my dad worked at, like I said, at Continental. So I was aware that, half of the organization is on the operational side, not the corporate side. And if you're talking about pilots, a lot of those guys have military experience, right? And even people in the baggage claim and whatnot. And so I just started kind of knocking, and then and United liked the story. It made sense. It was right in the middle of COVID, so it was early on. But they flew me out. We launched. I think it was in Dulles and Denver, I want to say, for Veterans Day. And it was a lot of fun, and they featured us, like we said, in the Hemisphere magazine. And it really taught us a lot, because I had already didn't know that much when I came in, other than what I was learning by trying to put that meat processing deal together. In the convenience space, I mean, you're USDA inspected, so most of the safety stuff happens at that that side of things, and there's a lot that goes into that with the HACCP plans and everything else. But United was a completely different beast. They have a whole food safety program. You can't make a mistake on an airline. You'll get booted, right? So there can't be any mold issues. There can't be any delivery issues. And so we went from a very small operation to delivering 100,000 plus units every month. Ooh. And it was in the middle of COVID. The worst of it was my memory is always terrible. I want to say it was at the end of 21, whenever it just seemed like inflation was insane. Logistics were like trying to put anything together. And I'm in a contract with United where I've got to deliver to a certain price. And at the time I was buying the beef, which I've since stepped away from. And I'm not a commodity trader, right? And you're doing you're buying this stuff spot pricing. And it was really, really difficult trying to do that, put all that together. But we made it work. We had to do a couple rescue packages where our rescue missions where our shipments got sent in some other place and they got destroyed. We had to go send somebody to pick them up. And my operations guy, who's also a former Marine and third group guy, it was like, honestly, it was like being back in Afghanistan to some extent. You were just making stuff up just to do whatever you can to make this thing happen, because I could not afford to not make those deliveries. A, you were going to be out of a lot of money, and B, you possibly are going to lose that contract. So you did whatever you had to do. You were putting together trucks with literally Afghani guys that came back from Afghanistan. You would hire to go, pick these things up. It was getting pretty creative there for a while, but we learned a ton. And at the end of the day, it taught us a lot about the food safety piece, taught us how to scale. So it was a great experience.
That's awesome. Mindful of your time, before we close it out, I want to highlight some of the organizations that you're constantly giving back to. We'll do those towards the end, but why don't you tell us, what's next for Anthem? What are you up to, and what's your day-to-day like going on right now? You got some...
Yeah, I think what's next right now is we've worked really hard, given that I'm kind of bootstrapping this thing myself. So there's only so fast you can move, but we worked really hard on just building out kind of our product portfolio. We hired, mid last year, we hired a real VP of sales who has real experience. So it's not me making stuff up. We went to our first couple of food shows, by the way, which was awesome in Vegas. We had the Resorts World. The whole tower was lit up with our stuff. It was super cool.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. And so this year is really just about executing. We have a couple new flavor profiles coming out. It's really about execution and scaling. It's important to me that we get Costco right. We'll get a chance at Walmart down the road, and some of these big organizations, that we've just got to take the story, take the product, and really take it to the next level. As far as in the future, I do have a vision of this being a snack company, not just meat snacks. And so I think it's important. I almost launched Trail Mix in the middle of that logistical nightmare when I was dealing with United. And I realized it's actually harder to do trail mix than beef jerky at that time, because you're sourcing the nuts from all over the world. And it was impossible to get consistent deliveries at that time. I think that's what we're focused on. I think we've done a really good job of building the brand. We need to tell the story a little bit more. We've had some amazing experiences, like I said, from United to, I mean, watching, I love Max Holloway, but watching Max Holloway get knocked out over the Anthem logo was amazing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
just
that's
like that.
right.
So, some of that stuff is, some of that stuff is surreal, because you're like, that thing will last forever, which is a big reason we did the UFC thing. And so really just partnering with the right people. We were trying to put something together with Greg on using his beef, and we weren't able to put it together for this round, but we're still working towards that. We want to do something there. It's important that we work within our community, whether it's the ranchers like Greg and Little Belt Cattle Company, or it's with the nonprofit organizations throughout the country, but we like to focus also the ones in our backyard.
Awesome. And to just kind of highlight some of the organizations you got, I know you also do work with GovX for all the first responders and military guys for discounts and stuff like that to get your product. But highlight some of the organization nonprofits that you give back to. It's pretty awesome. You guys send some of your proceeds to them.
Yeah, we are agnostic with who we work with, but I will say early on we realized for us to have the most impact, it's very hard to work with a very large organization. A, they don't need your check, and B, I don't even know if they necessarily take your phone call. So we really focused on two things when we started out. One, who's in our backyard, and that's Montana nonprofits here in Montana. Montana has one of the highest per capita veteran populations, and with a beautiful backdrop. It just made sense to me to work with the organizations here. I could drop by anytime. I can get to know the organizations. It's not somebody sitting in Fifth Avenue who then does some retreat or something, and then that you don't even know where half the money's going. So we work with Big Sky Bravery out here. They work with active duty military. We work with Talons Reach Foundation. Nick Jones is a former Navy Cross recipient. We work with Warriors in Quiet Water, which is amazing, run by Brian over there, who's a former Marine. Greg Putnam was actually on their board. We do Heroes and Horses out here. Those are kind of the staples out here. Station Foundations out here. Those are kind of the staples out here in Montana. The other piece of it is we work with people in the special ops community. The ones that are really close to us is Special Forces Charitable Trust, Green Beret Foundation. That's kind of our background. But we've cut checks for Warriors Heart Foundation. Really anybody that's doing good work. We did it's like 40,000 pull-ups, I think, in 4 days. We were doing with GBRS and Fieldcraft at the time to raise for, I think it was Warriors Heart Foundation for the work they were doing. And then we just recently signed with our first really big national organization, which is Folds of Honor. And they're about, cutting checks to make sure and giving scholarships to make sure that Gold Star family members and veterans get scholarships to continue their education. And they do that all the way from 5th grade all the way through college. And so that's really important to us. And so some of those are some of the organizations we work with. We're really, really proud of it.
Yeah, it's so phenomenal. I mean, I'll put all those in the show notes so everyone can check those out. And you also have like a kind of a giving collection too, right? What's that going about? The art and some of that other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, some of the stuff you just kind of make up on the fly. At the time, when you don't have a lot of money, you're trying to figure out how do you get the most impact, right? And you start working with these organizations, and you start realizing, well, who do you know in your network? Who do you know that does certain things? And at the end of the day, how can you raise the most amount of money and awareness for that organization? And when you start out and you're losing money running a business, and you're still cutting checks, but it's hard to have that impact. And so we started showing up to some of these galas, and we started realizing, well, you have a room full of people with, holding up paddles that are willing to part ways with their money for a good cause. You just need to be able to tell the story and then give them a unique offering. And so we knew people that were in the art space and doing certain things, and we just really started piecing it together, where at the end of the day, instead of cutting a check for $1,000, maybe we can commission an art piece where the artist would give us a discount because they know it's for a good cause for $1,000, and that painting can go for $5,000+ or something along those lines, right? And it was a unique art piece. And so, and my former team leader was a guitar Luther. So he made guitars, and so we had one of those. We auctioned off. I think went for like K or something. And that was just getting started. Like, we have a couple more pieces that we want to do. So it's just really a unique way of doing something that really brings more attention. Hopefully that's when it's sitting on some, donor's wall, it's a story that they can tell. And you're going to talk about two things. One, the organization and the money you help donate to, and for the cause you help donate to. And two, whoever made the piece of work, you're helping artists out, or in some cases they're veterans. So you're really kind of showcasing, people working with their hands. And so it's just a fun way to give back.
Yeah, and you've got like a ton of different organizations. Obviously, Greg is in there in your journal too, like on your website. So you've got like different, Flags of Valor, Hunter Constantine, Alpha Coffee, Search and Rescue, Little Belt Cattle, like I mentioned, Ripcord Guitars,
Yep.
and then obviously you're in Montana, so anything to do with hunting and fly fishing kind of ties into all of that as well. So
for sure.
Before we close it out, I usually have a couple fun questions, a couple rapid fire ones. One is is there like a dish or recipe that you think everyone should try out there, whether it's something that you make or something you've had out in your travels and you're like, man, this is like something you should try?
Oh, man, I'm a big ramen guy lately. So I'm just like super into ramen because I didn't grow up on it necessarily. And I've got friends that have really pulled me into it. So that's my latest kick. I'm just into ramen lately. Awesome. I don't have like necessarily a recipe. I love it.
Okay. I got definitely some spots for you. So I'll put those in. And then gear. Everyone loves gear. Everyone loves kit. Is there something that makes your day easy throughout the day that's part of your EDC every day?
I'm like every other guy. I carry a flashlight, like your typical EDC stuff. So nothing that probably stands out more than the next guy. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I like everything. I carry a pocket knife and everything else. But
totally. And then appreciate you, man. Like this kind of 5 years in the making, me having to sit down with you. It's kind of crazy. The ride that you're on and what you're doing is awesome. And I leave it up to you. The floor is yours. Appreciate you coming on the podcast. And any advice you want to give, maybe business wise or things that people are going through, and anything you want to promote. It's all yours, man.
Yeah, I mean, look, man. I think especially for the veterans out there, I think entrepreneurship is very, very challenging. I encourage everyone to do it if it's within your capacity to do it. Meaning, you have the ability to do it. It'll teach you a lot. This is probably the hardest thing I've done. It honestly, it's probably harder than what I did in the military, because at least in the military, you know what you sign up for. This is, and somewhat predictable in the sense of like you get a steady paycheck, and then you know what you're risking out there, which is life or death. So it's the ultimate sacrifice. This in some ways is harder because it's very unpredictable. And I think it's important for the veterans to take all your learnings that you took from the military and understand that life is going to be challenging. But I will tell you, you have an advantage over a lot of people out here, because a lot of people don't know how to deal with adversity and make good decisions and kind of slow their breathing and have a moral compass, something you really believe in and whatnot. Not to say there aren't amazing entrepreneurs out there. I just think veterans are underappreciated. And I think this is a space, especially coming from the guys I know, especially in the soft community, where you've had a little bit of autonomy, where you can actually build stuff on your own. This is probably right up your alley. It's challenging, but it is very rewarding as well. So I would just say life could deal you a lot of blows and a lot of challenges, and we've all gone through our stuff, but keep your head down, work hard. You will make it through this. This is actually an opportunity for a lot of veterans. So if you have the ability to start your own thing and build something, I think you should jump into it if you have that opportunity.
Boom. Thank you, Nate. On that note, you can get all your snacks at anthemsnacks.com, and you can hit them up on IG as well, on Instagram at Anthem Snacks. Thanks, Nate. I appreciate everybody for listening.